you look at a wider finance team, either has that skill set or the inclination to go and talk to their banking partners or their banking relation manager and spend a good 2 or 3 hours having to listen or attend a particular event. We in Treasury have learned that's an important part of what we do. It's almost a bit like, I call it fact finding in some ways, but also it's about, as you say, developing a relation. Because fundamentally, one of the aspects I think that differentiates Treasury from other departments in the fact that we have to demonstrate a high level of integrity. I'm not suggesting other departments don't, but for the simple purpose that we're dealing with cash. We're dealing with the company's cash and money. And similarly, the banks have the same responsibility.
Before we start, I want to highlight the biggest challenge I've noticed in the Treasury industry. It's professionals finding it tough to build an impactful brand. That's exactly why I put together an ebook, Building and Managing an Impactful Professional Brand. It has helped over 100 professionals define their unique values and stand out in their careers. In this ebook, you'll find practical tips to build a strong network and sharpen the skills you need to succeed in this industry. And the best part? It's completely free. Grab your copy now by clicking the link in the description below. Welcome to this week's episode of the Treasury Truth or Dare podcast, where we test Treasury professionals with a simple choice, truth or dare. Today, we welcome Royston Da Costa, who has had an amazing career spanning 37 years. He currently serves as the assistant treasurer at Ferguson. Previously, he has held senior level positions at companies like Sky and Gillette. Royston is ready to face our unique challenge. Throughout the session, he will tackle critical topics like the strategic role of Treasury, Treasury technology, intercompany loan structure, and the potential of generative AI. In our many Truth or Dare rounds, Royston will decide whether to share his professional experience or take on a daring challenge live. Adding to the excitement, after round 5, Royston gets a turn to issue a dare or two to me, and I'll accept any challenge live on the podcast. Stay tuned as Royston makes his first choice, promising a full session of Treasury Truths and daring challenges. Hello everyone, this is Ernie Humphrey, and I'm your host for the Treasury Truth or Dare podcast. Our featured guest today is Royston Da Costa. He's the assistant treasurer at Ferguson. So Royston, welcome to the webcast, and why don't you give us a little bit about your background before we dive in here?
Well, thank you, Ernie, and welcome to all your listeners and viewers to this podcast. It sounds an interesting initiative that you've got here. So I'm the assistant treasurer at Ferguson. We are a value-added distributor of plumbing, heating products in North America. We're based in Virginia. I'm based in the UK. We're a $30 billion business, primarily listed on the New York Stock Exchange, and we have a secondary listing on the London Stock Exchange. I've been with Ferguson coming up to 22 years in various roles within Treasury. I am primarily responsible for the intercompany loan structure in the UK, as well as the group's Treasury technology. I've been in Treasury for 37 years, working for various companies like Sky, Gillette, Seagram's, and Vivendi Universal. I'm also a senior lecturer at the Center for Technology and Entrepreneurship, CFTE, on generative AI in corporate treasury. And I appear on a monthly panel, Treasury Dragons, reviewing the latest Treasury FinTech solutions. We've won a couple of awards along the way for future-proofing our Treasury technology and best cybersecurity solution under the Adam Smith Awards, Treasury Today.
Wow, thank you very much. And that just illustrates why I'm honored and humbled to have Royston on as a guest. He has tremendous experience. He has tremendous experience as a thought leader across the globe, great experience in Treasury, overseas, a lot of different continents in the U.S. as well. So let's get down to it. Just a reminder, the way our Treasury Truth or Dare podcast works is I give each our guests the opportunity in each of 10 rounds to select truth or dare. If they select truth, I'll ask them to share their Treasury truth on a given topic. If they select dare, then I'm going to try and push them a little bit out of their comfort zone and get them to do something they might not normally do on a podcast. One of the exciting parts of our podcast is after round 5, Royston gets to ask me to do a dare, and I will certainly do that live. So, Royston, let's get things started with round 1. Would you like to start us off with a truth or a dare to get us going here?
Oh, let's get warm up first. Let's start with truth, please.
All right. So this is really important. We help the audience get to know you a little bit. In which areas of Treasury are you most passionate?
That's a great one to start with, actually. So, without question, the technology part, and there's good reason for that, apart from what you might think is obvious. In the 37 years I've been in Treasury, I have seen how the technology has been very, very sorely lacking, frankly, until, dare I say, 4 or 5 years ago, if I'm being brutally honest. But more importantly, I think my role significantly changed towards the focus on technology at the last economic crisis in 2008. That's when our group, like a lot of companies, had a massive restructuring, re-engineering of our processes, and in rethinking in terms of the trajectory we were on and the roadmap our board had in plan. And frankly, that was what really began our journey towards the cloud. And in fact, today we have 13 cloud-based solutions, and our first cloud-based solution we implemented in 2015 was Coupa, and it was a big game changer for us. So, yes, to say that I'm passionate about technology is a bit of an understatement, frankly, because I don't think we've got enough time in this podcast to really capture all the different aspects of the technology that I'm not just passionate about, but actually I'm very optimistic about as well, particularly obviously in terms of treasury. Just to give you a bit of an insight of what I'm referring to here. So I do, as I say, apart from Treasury Dragons, I do various presentations on the subject. My favorite technology, actually, and it's already out there, but it's not really kind of come into Treasury in a big way, is digital twins. And the reason I say that is because digital twins lends itself very neatly, in my view, to areas like cash flow forecasting, where you effectively have a real-time digital replica of your structure, process, or it can be even a human being, frankly, in the ether, and you can stress test that real time. And you can imagine if that technology or process was available before the pandemic, there'd be a lot more certainty about what and how companies would react and should react to a situation like that. So it's being utilized in the automobile industry quite widely, but yeah, I could go on forever, but there's so many other technologies. At the moment, clearly, AI is the one that most treasurers are aware of, and perhaps we can pick that up in another question later on.
Great. Thank you for sharing your passion with us. So that's an amazing start. So let's go ahead and transition to our next round. So let's go to round 2. You want a little bit more warm up? Are you ready to give us a little sauce with your first dare on the podcast?
Yes, why not?
All right. So we're gonna have a dare. So you talked about your love of technology, but one of the things that's very interesting about you is you have a real commitment to people and managing relationships. So can you share with us a mistake you've made in managing people across international borders and what you've learned from it?
Absolutely. And this is what I frankly love about working in Treasury. It's the opportunity to meet different people and interact with people. I think you have to have social skills for that. And in my early part of my career, perhaps I wasn't as experienced as I should have been. So thinking, particularly when I worked for one of my previous companies, had international operations, and I was responsible for effectively looking at the intercompany loans in that case. But this was slightly more, sort of detailed, involved, really looking to liaise with some of the subsidiaries that were based in the Caribbean, and not fully appreciating, first of all, obviously I knew there's a time zone difference, but the cultural approach to how they would necessarily consider something that I'd prioritize as being urgent on my books. And it was really being able to master the ability where in those days we didn't have the internet. So there was no Zoom calls or Teams calls where you can even see the person. I know these are not ideal either, but it was very much using an old style telephone, not knowing what the person looked like, not being able to gauge body language, any of that stuff. But being able to still, as a master the ability to win them over, sort of to understand the challenges they were facing, and more importantly, I say the cultural aspects of everything is not necessarily done within the same urgency and speed that you'd expect, certainly over here in the UK and in the West generally, or some of the more, there's a large company as you know, um, and you know, being able to do that over a period of time actually did pay dividends, and learning that skill. A similar example I would say was perhaps more nearer to home and this is by no means necessarily picking on that in that country, but we had I worked for a company where the head office was in the UK, the back office was in the Netherlands. And again, the point being learned very quickly is that quite often when you have to manage relationships remotely, it's not always ideal. Now, I'm not referring to working in a hybrid situation because I think that's slightly different. But I'm thinking in terms of for the first time when you're dealing with colleagues you've never met. I believe very much in the ability to talk face to face, to meet face to face. Because for a while when I joined this company, I faced a bit of, let's say, blockage from these particular colleagues that happened to be based abroad. And thankfully, I had a trip organized to go and meet them. And it was a bit like day and night. The minute I shook their hand, it was, that's it. What do you want me to do for you? What can I do for you? I had said nothing. I didn't anything for them. I didn't take them to eat chocolates, in fact. But the point being, they were able to put face to name, and it was just being able to have that contact, that social contact that seemed to make the world a difference. Now, for the record, I wasn't able to go every month or in fact every 6 months to see them, but it did help to facilitate the ongoing relationship.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing that information. Just myself, I had similar situations. It's hard to appreciate a little bit of the cultural differences until you experience that. And so, spending more time understanding those dimensions of building a relationship are incredible. And also the other thing that you said as well, in Treasury, we get a little bit intense and maybe we don't communicate as well as we should our feelings and our soft side. But then you see someone in person, like you said, and you shake hands. So I think the big learning from what you said, which I also have, is meet face to face. Whatever you can do to make that happen, shake hands, all of the perceptions that you have by emails and things, they just kind of all of a sudden melt away. It's like we're on the same team. It's easy to say it virtually, but when you look someone in the eye and you shake their hand, I think that's
And it's
incredible.
more than that, Ernie, and something else that's reminded me of. It's actually having them articulate. They some quite often there are challenges that these your potential colleagues face, or the people they are interacting with, but they're not comfortable for whatever reason able to discuss that virtually or on the phone. But actually being there in person somehow gives them the license, if you like, to kind of share a bit more openly. And some things that you might not be fully aware of, whether it's to do with a report that you expect a certain time every week or whatever, suddenly you find out actually this person has children, or might have commitments outside of work. It could be a host of other things, or even could be something to the work situation where I don't know, someone else is using the particular file at that time. It could be anything, but it's just having that visibility and the license for that person to open up, which so often seems to only work when you're there in person.
Share with us, do you believe that there's a need to better connect US and Treasury across the world? And how can we do that? Our peers across the world.
So when you say US, you are referring to
Yeah.
USA.
Yeah, US versus
Yeah, do you know what? It's interesting, a very good question because it's quite topical for me. What I've found, particularly now, we are a US company. We've made no question or bones about that. We changed our name in 2017, And, we listed on the stock exchange last year. But, the fact is that I see Treasury, particularly now with the way technology has evolved, as becoming more and more global. And the issues and challenges that faces here in the UK appear, certainly from my perspective, to be very similar to what the US are facing, and in some respects, what I've in the Far East, and you've got the Middle East now, and in fact, even Africa, which is a fast growing area when it comes to thinking about technology, and certainly in terms of treasury. So connecting the US to the rest of the world, let's say stereotypes that have been rightly or wrongly applied to the US. And I think that there is an element of today when you think of from a currency perspective, the US dollar is still a huge player in that space. And the degree to when you look at US companies, and they pretty much, well, most of them probably don't have the exposures that non-US companies have in terms of other currencies. There's an element of being perhaps a bit too, sort of inward focus. But I see the next generation, or this certainly the current generation of not treasurers globally, being much more open to collaboration internationally. And the way I see this happening is very much through conferences. So the conferences I present at or attend, like the Eurofinance conference, the HT conference, and certainly the AFP conference, have all demonstrated to me in certainly the last few years, the appetite by not just US treasurers, because that's, I think, very important, actually, it's a key point, but also international treasurers in getting together to share best practice. And as you can imagine, when you think about the largest companies in the world, they are US companies. So it's probably quite, silly to think in some ways that, the US are somehow excluded from a global environment, because you look at Amazon, Microsoft, US companies, inevitably we're connected through at least the applications. But now with social media as well, I think that's also brought us a lot closer. So for me, it's a very promising and optimistic future. And I'm not going to say just from a US perspective, although I know the questions come from that. I would say from a global perspective. So wherever you are based as a treasurer in the world, combine that with the ability to work remotely. I think this also lends itself very neatly to the fact that treasury is in a very sweet spot, in my view. Very sweet spot. And we can talk a bit more about that if you want. But very simply, I'll put it at this point. Not only we're a major stakeholder on board now in terms of the expertise that we have, particularly since the pandemic and some of the economic crisis we've seen, but also the fact that we have a skill set that we bring to most companies that quite often senior leadership recognize, particularly when they can't seem to find anyone else within the company who would have the ability to handle that particular challenge. Yeah. So I see this opportunity for treasurer and for treasury, for that matter, only getting better.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I myself, I appreciate the fact that you are doing that yourself, right? You're being a thought leader in the US space, but you're still active in the international space and like ACT and AFP. And so whatever that vehicle is, you're helping inspire folks to realize that we should connect across the globe. For me, I think Treasury has a little bit of an image problem. And the more that we work together to take what's great about Treasury, maybe outside the US, and how it's looked at and viewed as a strategic role, and bring that over to the US, I think we need more work on, especially at the smaller companies, to have Treasury viewed as a more strategic function and communicate the value that we offer. All right,
sure.
On to round 4. Truth or dare?
Go for that.
All right. There's one. Quick hitter. We're cracking the shell of Royston a little bit. What's something that few people know about you that you would like to share?
Oh God, this is a hard one, actually. I would say, and it's again, you talked about treasury, and in terms of what's good about treasury, we get a bit of a bad rap from our colleagues because they see treasury as kind of, historically anyway, you know, going out on the golf course and playing golf and probably not doing a lot of work. But that's obviously not true, and certainly not currently anyway. That's not seen many of those happen. But one of the opportunities I did get through a bank actually was to attend an event, which was actually a tennis event. And there's a tennis player you might have heard of called Pat Cash. He's actually won some championships and trophies. And he was available, if you like, to play table tennis in this case with anyone who wants to challenge him. And I'm not saying I'm a brilliant table tennis player, but I was, I thought it would be a bit of fun. So I did. I took it up. I took up the challenge and I played him and I beat him,
Oh,
which I
wow.
was quite chuffed about because, I, to be, it's one of those funny situations where you never expect that to happen in
Yeah.
sort of in a real life situation. But yeah, so I would say that was one of the, and
Hey,
it's one of the
love it.
good things about having to work at
Love
Treasury,
it.
where you're going to a bank event, which I know is kind of
Yeah.
a very social environment, and of course you do have to go through the kind of proverbial bank sort of selling whatever the products they have. But this was a nice little touch of
All
being able
right.
to play someone
Uh,
famous.
all right. Royston is a renowned table tennis star, so he's
Oh
gonna
God,
he's
I'm going to
he's
get all
gonna
sorts of
take all
challenges coming
challengers.
through.
We're gonna get a ping pong table here
Okay,
at a conference
why not? Why
and
not?
see
It's a
if
good
you
way of
see that's a great
socializing.
idea. We'll
Yeah,
definitely do that. That brings the fun in Treasury. All right. So thank you for
absolutely.
sharing that.
No
All
worries.
right. Let's go. One more round for you, and then you get to ask me a dare. What
Yeah.
truth or dare for you?
Let's end with the truth.
All right. Okay. Well, yeah, we have a few more rounds after you get to get some fun with me. So just a few things. Are there any myths about the role of Treasury that you would like us to address or would like to, you know, put to bed about us as a profession so we can help dispel those myths? What are things you hear that bother you that you think are way off base?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a myth, and it's kind of like a lack of understanding in some ways or many ways around tragedy. And it's a number of questions there I would like to address because you kind of mentioned also about how treasure could be promoted. And I feel that historically we've not done a great job in selling treasury. It's been always portrayed as a bit of a dark art, very specialized, which it is. But I feel that perhaps because of some of the world events that have happened with the economic crisis, the pandemic, so on and so forth, Treasury's been brought to the forefront. And I think more people, certainly within the senior management in companies, have recognized the value of Treasury. I think that's a good starting point. I think we're still lacking that visibility outside of your normal company, certainly in society. If you ask someone on the street what someone in Treasury does, I don't think there would be and with good reason, be able to explain articulately what that entails. So quite often, I don't know about you, well, certainly from my perspective, when I'm asked what area I work in, I have to say finance rather than treasury to try and get some kind of resonance with them understanding. So the myth I would say is that certainly those colleagues we have within, not so much now, but within companies I work, would typically assume that treasury are the ones that wine and dine banks. Thankfully, that myth really doesn't exist so much anymore, particularly since the pandemic, because that, as you know, a lot of banks have kind of reined that in. But one thing I think people fail to recognize as well, and I'm not saying this happens to everyone, so clearly it's not widespread, but these events that banks hold from time to time, I think are much more beneficial nowadays or, looking forward because of the mix of hybrid working as well. Having that social kind of contact, that one-to-one contact is very vital in my view. But it's also where quite often you get some very insightful and valuable tips just to either speaking to the bank or some other corporates that you network with, a bit like going to a conference in a way. So, and although historically one would argue, the treasurers would argue that they would use that opportunity to have the relationship meeting with their banking contact. And more often than ever, this is where some very strategic discussions are sometimes had, and information is shared that sometimes can't be shared through a call like this or on paper. So for me, I would love for Treasury to be more so better recognized for what we do. And let's be clear, and I'm not this is me not be playing the victim, or whatever, but the fact I always maintain is with most departments, they can go home at 5 o'clock if it's a 9 to 5 role. Treasury is one of the few areas I worked in where I would say we never can say that. Admittedly, most days we do, but the nature of what we handle, if there's a crisis or in terms of payments or cash, We cannot afford to say we finished at 5 o'clock. So we're literally 24/7. And you've heard all the cliches in terms of, cash is king or cash never sleeps. You must have, some of the famous films, film one-liners. And that's so true. Quite often, when there's a situation with disaster recovery or some sort of major issue, event like the pandemic, we're one of the first that are called to come to task to help with the company. In fact, one of the phrases I love, which not it's a bit graphic, but I think it's very apt, is that treasure is like the blood in your body. Until you have a cut, you don't realize how important it is.
So, uh, yeah, I love that. I've had conversations with a couple other folks, and we talk about how our folks in accounting look at the past, FP&A looks at the future, and Treasury is the now. So, like you said, if something happens, we're the ones who have to, so to speak, fix the wound so the company can continue to thrive. Okay, here it is. People have been waiting for this. So, Royston, you had the opportunity to give me a dare. So, let me know what your dare is for me for our podcast.
Yeah, I'd love to know, what is your hidden talent?
Oh, my hidden talent. I don't know if I have any hidden talents just because I'm always pontificating, about everything and singing and dancing and everything. So people will be surprised at my hidden talent. I'd say my hidden talent, which I don't get to flex, is quantitative analysis. So I was in grad school and I did some PhD work, and I was the TA for PhD level econometrics, which is very quantitative. So I have this personality and mind and suits and things, but I actually have a very quantitative, and I actually love statistics. So I think that's probably my hidden talent that I don't get to express enough. Sometimes when I talk to people, they're like, yeah, I had some of that stuff. So
Excellent. So that's really fascinating because, with
yeah,
AI, this is exactly the area where it's making the biggest impact. In fact, one of
right.
my contacts came up with a think about quantitative analysis about, believe it or not, the data's in the internet. The New York cab drivers kind of interaction, if you like. So what's the busiest time of the day, how many customers it has. And I think I forget what the other parameters were, but he got this from the internet. It was a huge amount of data, but he just put it into a graph. And he's thinking, first of all, I guess, who would want to know this information? But actually, it was fascinating just to think that because of AI, this is something that's much more achievable now, whereas before we would struggle. But yeah, that's
Yeah.
fascinating. Thank you for sharing that.
Okay. All right, let's get back to Royston. We're gonna have a few quick hitters here.
Yeah.
So give me a truth or dare.
Ah, yeah, why not?
Okay, here's another one. What movie is your guilty pleasure?
Well, I not many of your listeners might know this, but or heard of this film, but it's actually a film called Doctor Zhivago.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Right, and the reason I absolutely love that film, and I've watched it not many times, but every so often I watch it. It's a long film, to be fair. It's Omar Sharif in it, and it, for me, was because I saw it at a very young age. I think I must have been around 10. It just inspired me in many ways to learn more about, you know, the Russia really and the Soviet Union at one point. But it also gave me a great insight into the Russian Revolution and some of the, sort of the thinking behind that country today and how they, sort of fared through the various ages. But certainly, Doctor Zhivago is one of those films where it's kind of, yeah, a bit of a it's got a bit of a romantic aspect to it, I guess, but it's all filmed really well, and I think, the actors were great in it. So yeah, that's one I love.
Okay. Oh, thank you for showing us the multi-dimensional aspects to your personality. A Dr. Shivago, and then just slamming a ping pong ball, right to Pat Cash, So very interesting. So thanks for sharing that with me. All right, truth or dare.
To the truth.
Uh, so you touched on earlier about bank and bank relationships. Uh, Truth is truth. Give me some background on this. We should spend more time investing in our relationships with our bankers. as Treasury professionals?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, actually. I mean, my initial answer to that is absolutely yes. But I think what we need to also recognize is, there's so clearly I'm from an older generation, and I think in a few years, if not already, we'll have 5 generations in the workplace for the first time ever. The reason I'm saying that, Ernie, is because, each generation has a different approach to how they want to navigate and negotiate these type of relationships, transactions, whatever you like to call them. As I said before, I think remote and hybrid working is still very important for the flexibility it offers. I think it's a benefit for many people actually, and I certainly find it quite beneficial. But I'm also a great believer, as I said before, in meeting face to face. And I think they work really well together now because what I find myself doing quite often is I will focus my meetings on a particular day or when I go to a conference, and I will maximize the utility I get out of those meetings with those banks and then those counterparts. But I still believe that investing in these relationships is so critical because quite often, you're not able, I think, to still glean information and sometimes little nuances by having a Zoom call. I think quite often Zoom calls are just, again, a tool that we use to kind of help us in our roles. And they're certainly better than perhaps what we didn't have before. But I still believe that investing in, sort of face-to-face meetings and developing that relationship with your banking partner. So let's think of it also in terms of, going back to the definition of what do we do in Treasury? Not everyone within if you look at a wider finance team, either has that skill set or the inclination to go and talk to their banking partners or their banking relation manager and spend a good 2 or 3 hours having to listen, sort of attend a particular event. We in Treasury have learned that that's an important part of what we do. It's almost a bit like, I call it fact finding in some ways, but also it's about, as you say, developing a relation. Because fundamentally, one of the aspects I think that differentiates Treasury from other departments in the fact that we have to demonstrate a high level of integrity. I'm not suggesting other departments don't, but for the simple purpose that we're dealing with cash, we're dealing with the company's cash and money. And similarly, the banks have the same responsibility. So there has to be, in my view, an understanding and a level of trust between us and our banking partners. So that when times get difficult, and they have done over in the past, when you have economic crisis and pandemic, you can actually communicate with your banking partner, and they know at the end of the day that to a degree that what you're saying is being sincere and correct, and vice versa. Clearly, at the end of the day, processes and policies take precedent, but that the relationship aspect, that's something you don't necessarily, manufacture overnight. It's something that's built and developed over years.
Okay, you shared with us an awful lot of truths in the questions that we asked. So let's have one more round of truth or dare with you.
Let's do
So,
that. Come
all
on.
right, let's do a dare. All right. Well, we're not going to be able to do this one live, but I'm gonna dare you to write a post on LinkedIn about how much fun you're having on the Treasury Truth or Dare podcast, and then we're going to go ahead and add this to the back end of the episode here. So we'll go ahead and make that your dare, and let's do this. Let's give Royston one more shot to ask me to do a dare. So give me one more dare while you work on that LinkedIn post.
If you were stranded on a desert island with someone like your company, who would you choose and why?
Oh, well, there's no one else at my company but myself, but actually, I wouldn't wanna be trapped on a desert island with myself. I wouldn't torture myself. So so let me twist this. So just, in my treasury world, if I was stranded on a desert island, right, who would I want that to be? Of course, I'm gonna say my wife because she might listen to my podcast, so that'd be my first choice. There's a gentleman who's been a friend and colleague of mine for several years. His name is Jim Gilligan. We started off. I was in Treasury, a little guy. He asked me to speak at an AFP regional event, and has always been there for me. I ended up working at AFP as a subject matter expert for Treasury, for the whole, whoever AFP serves the whole world. And through all my adventures, he's always been there with me. He's very fun. He has a lot of fun. He knows a lot. He's very caring. He's very well rounded. So, I know he wouldn't want to be stuck with me, but that's someone
You
who
never
I
get a
might
choice.
who I might want
Thank
to be
you.
stuck with.
That's
So
pretty.
let me let you wrap things up. So first of all, I'm going to thank you for being on the podcast, and secondly, what is it that you would like to leave our listeners here? What is one takeaway that you'd like to share from your truce or treasury? The one takeaway that you'd like our listeners to have?
Yeah, no, thank you, and it's been great, Ernie, having this opportunity. I think Treasury is an exciting place to work, to be in, and I think the opportunity is huge. I really mean that. I think it's also incumbent upon all of us and those that want to come into Treasury to be open. I think it's so important to be open to not just the opportunities, but to learning. So one thing I've definitely found, particularly with AI coming in and some of these new technologies, is the scope for expanding my knowledge base. As much as, we've all sort of studied college, universities, and then done qualifications, the ability to kind of continue that learning is now almost open ended. And we're not talking about going and doing an MBA or postgraduate or anything like that, but of course, some people do. It's just really going on to an online course or picking up a book or whatever it is. It's just being open to doing that so that we can not only upskill ourselves, but be better placed as this industrial revolution works its way through with AI and the impact that's having, so that we're not at the end of this in maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years, left in a situation where we feel we're not able to kind of meet the requirements of the day. Um, but it's really meant to be as a exciting challenge rather than negative challenge, because for me, you think about the smartphone coming in 2006. I don't think hopefully no one's going to say, oh, this is really terrible that we got this phone. Everyone embraced it pretty much. And we get excited, I think I do. Certainly when you get an app on there that you want to install that you can use, that's going to benefit you, that's going to make life easier for you, logging onto a bank. I see this almost a similar way with some of the technology that's coming to Treasury. It's coming in most part to help us be more efficient and to make our life easier. We do have to be cautious. I get that. And I'm not suggesting we just install whatever we want. But I definitely want to encourage everyone to look at Treasury as being a very exciting area to be in. And there's so much more to come.
Yeah. Love it. Passion for learning, intellectual curiosity, and
Yeah,
embrace the dynamics that life and technology have to offer us in the treasury space. So finally, once again, thank you very much, Royston, for being a guest.
my
And
pleasure.
to our viewers, live your treasury truce and dare to be great. Until next
Absolutely.
time, everyone, thank you very much. Thanks for watching the show. I hope you guys liked it. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Stay tuned and hit the subscribe button for more.